gotten some people progress, yes. So, we still have people joining us. We're going to be live on Facebook and try and get out as much information as we can today about endometriosis. We have a disclaimer, so let's get that out of the way. The information shared on this event is for general information and educational purposes only. It does not constitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for individuals. Please consult your health care provider if you have questions about your health or starting any treatment. The views and opinions expressed in this event are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by the Trinidad and Tobago Endometriosis Association, the TTEA, sponsors or donors. Due to the nature of this event, it may contain copyrighted by another entity or person. The TTEA sponsors and donors claims no copyright to said content, and the TTEA is a messenger and sharer of information and strives to verify, but cannot warrant the accuracy of copyright or completeness of the information on this program. So if you have a complaint or find your content is being used incorrectly, please contact the TTEA prior to making copyright claims. Any infringement was not done on purpose and will be rectified to all parties involved. All right, so good evening, everyone. So excited to be here. I'm Nikki Crosby, and I will be taking you through the afternoon. And it was afternoon by Silvia. We're getting into evening. We're in evening by us. So welcome all the board members. Thank you so much for being here. I see Abisha there, my queen, my hero, the lady that formed the Trinidad and Tobago Endometriosis Association. And of course, all the board members and all the participants, As I said, it's going to be on Facebook. We will record it and keep it running so we continuously get the information out there. We hope everyone is doing okay. We want to have a great evening. We're going for about an hour, and we have an amazing guest with us. Of course, today's discussion is basically beyond the endometriosis discussion and putting conversation into action, right? And we have Silvia Young. She is in San Francisco, California area. She's an author, and I will, before I introduce her formally, I'm going to just give you a little, hi Abisha, to how I ended up here and what I'm going to read to you. So I've had endometriosis from as far back as I could remember. And one of the things Silvia is going to touch on is that, I've been prodded and didn't know what it was for such a long time. And I was asked to be a participant in a book. And I had to write a chapter. And the name of the book is Virego, which means warrior woman. And so many awesome women out of Trinidad and Tobago contributed to the book. Penelope Spencer, Michaela Pandey, Anya Youngchi, just some of the ladies off the top of my head, Michelle Borrell, Penelope Spencer. And I decided that I would dedicate my chapter to basically women who couldn't have children. And through my experience with endometriosis. So we're going to start with me reading that piece that I wrote, and then Silvia will enlighten us. She's our guest speaker. So hope everybody relaxed. The name of the piece is called Cinderella My Foot. And I will read it to you. Hope you enjoy it. Cinderella My Foot. What do you mean I can't have children? You better go back and check again, because this is not how my Cinderella story is supposed to go. I mean, we are all taught as girl children that a prince will come on a white horse and sweep us off our feet. We would get married, have 2 children, a picket fence. Ooh, and don't forget the dog. Perfect life. At least that's what I thought. And in that order too. What I wasn't prepared for was a disease that would indicate that I have a child soon, whether I had my Prince Charming or not. I mean, sex in your 20s is supposed to be the most adventurous time of your life. You would literally have it anywhere, anytime, anyhow. But for me, sex was painful most of the time. I mean, I was totally embarrassed to mention it to my doctor, my friends, and God forbid, my mother. I mean, all my friends were having the time of their lives, and I was wondering what was wrong with me. While my friends were having awesome sex and all these romantic stories and saying, ooh, and I in ecstasy, I was saying, ooh, and I in pain. Eventually, I went to my doctor who picked up blood in my urine, and they thought it could be a problem with my kidneys. So I was tested, probed, prodded, and after a while, a few dollars, it was determined that my kidney was fine and maybe it was gynecological. Gynecological. It sounds expensive, right? Well, it was. Eventually, my doctor said to me, Nikki, you have endometriosis. Come again? Me endo what? I had something I had never heard of. I had to break it down for me to say it. Endometriosis. Endometriosis. A big word that would change my life. My doctor was explaining to me that it's a painful disorder which tissue that lines the inside of your uterus grows outside the uterus and and all I heard was it may lead to you not being able to have children. I mean, I was 26 years old, single, not finding myself. And yet my doctor told me I needed to try and have children. No, because as I got older, the disease would affect my ability to get pregnant. I had just returned from university in Canada, and that was the last thing on my list. Get pregnant and have a child. No. That was not how it was going to work. I had things to do. I thought about the men in my life at the time. I remember talking to my best gay friend, Bernard. He loved the idea, but we never quite worked out all the logistics and mechanics of how it would work. Life went on. I was not stressing as I thought children would always be in my cards. I mean, I'm the key. I love children and it will happen. Threw it out to the universe. It must happen. Soon after, I met my Prince Charming. Well, he didn't come on a white horse. He came on a white plane. Yeah, Caribbean Islands to be specific. Caribbean Airlines to be specific. He was a foreign youth. He lived in the US and was returning back to Trinidad after 30 years. He was a Navy veteran, and before I knew it, I was falling hard, like voodoo hard. He was married before with grown children in his mind. That was it. After our relationship got serious, we started to discuss having a child. We decided we would try for 5 years and we would give it everything we got. Woo-hoo! This would be fun. It was going to be like going to an amusement park. I would get to ride all the rides and have as many hot dogs that I wanted. We got married and my Cinderella adventure began. Well, let's put it this way. It wasn't Disneyland, right? It was more like a visit to the Labre Pitch Lake in an old jalopy. Talk about ups and downs. Firstly, if the wedding was any indication it might be bumpy, that was the sign. I broke my ankle 2 weeks before the wedding. Yes, 2 weeks. I can remember Cinderella breaking her tail while running down the carriage. I mean, she lost one shoe, not break her whole ankle. Plus, she didn't have to go back to the designer and say, excuse me, Diane Hunt, yeah, I know the dress is finished, but can you please hem it about 4 inches because, yeah, I broke my ankle. Or I am sure Cinderella didn't have to go from shoe shop to shoe shop, limping with one foot to find a sandal presentable enough for lifetime vows. Sorry, I know I get a little emotional. I start to shout. It's still very emotional to me. I remember asking God while watching the foot in the cast if this was a sign. Even if it was, I would not have heard because the church bell was ringing loudly. It was time to get married to my handsome prince. And it was time to go forth and multiply. This would just be another challenge in life that you have to face, I told myself. I mean, I always love challenges. Looking back at some that I have overcome, I realize is what drives me, you know? So getting pregnant with endometriosis, all I had to do was listen to my doctor, take my monthly injections, drink my mother bush tea, say my prayers, and everything would be okay. So we got married and tried. And every month I would ask myself, is this the magical month? Then bam, the period would come next day and all my fantasies would be shattered. I even got pregnant twice, but it all ended up the same. Waiting, hoping, praying. Time passed. Before you knew it, I was married about 6 years and no babies yet. We thought about doing the IVF, the in vitro, yeah. But the cost of it, my doctor suggested I buy land instead. I talked to God a lot and wondered what I had done in my life to warrant me not having children. If anything, children was not my purpose, then what was? I mean, we always try to fit into society's idea of what a perfect life is. Cinderella's life turned out perfect, but that was not my path. We all have different paths. And it took a while for me to realize that I had to find my own path. I had to write my own story with my own happily ever after. Then one day, out of the blue, there was acceptance. Acceptance that I would never get pregnant and experience motherhood, at least at that level. I was blessed with 3 children from my husband's first marriage, who I love unconditionally. Acceptance that I would use all my motherly instincts to work with children that needed love and guidance the most. Acceptance that this was my story and God always had a bigger plan for me. I just didn't see it. I just didn't understand it. I had to go through my own storms and pains to get to the level of understanding and growth that I have now. Over the years, I've worked with hundreds of children, maybe thousands, and I always wondered if I did have children, if I would have impacted so many. Your life may not be like Cinderella's, and that's quite okay. Write your own story. Thank you. That's it. Short chapter, not too long. Let me get you back here. All right, I come in here. Okay, I'm trying to open back up. All right, I don't know where my thing gone, but okay, there's everybody. Now I can find Nikki. So I hope you all enjoyed it. It was, still reading it, it still makes me very emotional because, we as women always feel that that's what we're supposed to do in life, have children. And then there's that acceptance of it's not going to happen due to this disease. So that's why it's so close to me. But I'm not a star today. The star today is our very own, well, I saw custom saying our very own, but I mean it under the endometriosis umbrella. And she is awesome. I'm so excited to hear her. She's dealing, today's topic is from storytelling, which I did a little of, to social justice. Silvia Young is a writer. She's a California menstrual equity organizer. Didn't even know they had that. And nonprofit founder and president of FemTruth Youth. She is an author who has written many books, one of them, Good Girl, Bad Period, Breaking the Silence of Misogyny and Gaslighting Through the Lens of Endometriosis. It's a 4th book under the FemTruth, and that one is coming out just now next month and will be available on Amazon. And Silvia's also wrote Gaslit. It's a 3-act play, a children's illustration book, Flo's Friends, a wellness guide beyond menstruation, and her most recent proposed legislation, Empowered Pupils, Women's Health Training. She was diagnosed with endometriosis after 25 years of medical gaslighting. She brings the biracial and multicultural life experience to her writing and activism. So let's wave those hands. Let's welcome her. She's a few hours behind us, but we appreciate her being here. Welcome, Silvia. Thank you so much for taking the time for the TTEA.
Hi, Nikki. Thank you so much for having me today. Your story was so powerful. And, every time I hear someone's story or have to say my own story, I still revisit that and get so choked up all over.
Yeah, I was reading it and was like, where's all this emotion coming from? I have a show to do.
But you are quite talented. Wow, you're a spoken word artist for sure.
Thank you, Silvia. We are so happy to have you here, and we're going to just keep spreading the information we get based on endometriosis, because we have so many young people to help. My passion has always been young girls who, because as a young person, I had those awful periods growing up. And, in the Caribbean, it's almost like, it's period pain, a woman handle it. And I tried to handle it until I realized something was really wrong. So I pass it over to you, Silvia. Thank you for being here on behalf of the TTEA. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Oh, thank you so much. So if we're going to go ahead with the presentation, Nikki? Great. Thank you so much. So today we're going to be talking about from storytelling to social impact. And for those that don't know, I'm Silvia Young, as Nikki introduced me, and I'm the founder of FemTruth. Next, please. So some things we're going to talk about today is I'm going to start with a disclaimer, because it wouldn't be an endo presentation without a very detailed disclaimer. Then I'm going to share a little bit more about me. And I'm also going to talk about the power of storytelling and some examples of social impact. At that point, if everyone would like to add in the chat some examples that they know, and we can create a really fun discussion there. Then I'm also going to talk about some historic Caribbean women, and then our own Caribbean women from the endo community that are in Good Girl, Bad Period. And as well as that, I'm going to have let you know how you can help if that's something you would like to do, and let you know how my latest book, Good Girl, Bad Period, is already having impact. So that's what we're going to talk about. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're going to go through this disclaimer because it's very important. Assigned female at birth, AFAB, trans and non-binary inclusive. Use of terms related to femme, female, girls, women, or women's health used herein, i.e. in referential citations, is intended only as a theoretical and historic framework. Such use is not intended to trivialize any and all lived experiences trying to access healthcare in a two-gendered system, and the many intersections facing added discrimination, included but not limited to ethnicity, race, culture, size, religion, gender, sexual orientation, age, disabilities, and socioeconomic bias. Endometriosis is a disease that faces institutional gaslighting to have society believe it's just a bad period, with the protocol being to control the period, then control the disease. If that doesn't work, to further gaslight the patient as psychosomatic. Within a two-gendered society, it has historically faced widespread misogyny through many warfare tactics. The limited data is only based on AFAB. But to clarify, endometriosis is not a menstrual disease, but a disease that can be triggered by the menstrual cycle. Endometriosis is a progressive disease characterized by chronic pain, heightened by debilitating flares. Each person's experience is unique. Endometriosis has been found on every organ of the body except the uterus. You do not need to have a uterus to have endometriosis. Yet to this day, it is still treated as a uterus disease. The lived experience of thousands worldwide makes a statement in complete defiance of status quo's doctrine held by the medical establishment. However, the onset of a menstrual cycle can be the first recognizable pattern of consistent flares. So get the disclaimer out the way, and I'm going to spend some time telling you a little bit about me, because sometimes it's easy to see the advocates and not realize that they also are dealing with tremendous, the backstory. Like, we don't have the answers, we are still living the experience. So I do speak from lived experience, 25 years of medical gaslighting, many surgeries and needless surgeries, infertility, and now disability. So that is, in a nutshell, where I'm at today. Next slide, please. Thank you. I began publishing under FemTruth in 2017. To give you a little bit more information, when I first started publishing, I wasn't actually public with my story yet. I understand that takes a tremendous amount of courage to come out as being chronically sick with an illness that people don't know about, or a disease. So when I started, I did use the pen name FemTruth, and that was my battle cry against the patriarchy. Really is where that name was from. It was trying to find my own truth within this propaganda. So I started writing, and you can see some of my books there. And my latest book is Good Girl, Bad Period, which we'll get into a little later. Next slide, please. Great. A little bit about the play I wrote, Silvia Young's Gaslit, a 3-act play. It has been performed at a few very special places. The University of California in Davis, the University of California at Berkeley, San Francisco State University, San Jose State University, and just last year, the PAD Project did it. They are creators of the Oscar-winning documentary Period End of Sentence, which if you haven't seen it, you must see it. And we are always partnering with more organizations to bring this play to more audiences. Next slide, please. Our host said she didn't know there was a menstrual equity organizer title that you could have. So that is what I've been doing in California for probably the last 7 to 8 years, is working on menstrual equity. I would have come in through the door with endometriosis, but the world wasn't ready for that conversation. We were barely ready to talk about menstrual equity. But we were able to get 3 laws passed in California, which was wonderful. I've had various resolutions passed and now written my own policy called Empower Pupils Women's Health Training, which really does talk about not just endometriosis, but adenomyosis, fibroids, PCOS, PMDD, and more. And it really focuses on not having the students get gaslit in the first place by having more educated people on campus. Next slide, please. My nonprofit, FemTruth Youth, is geared toward students. It focuses on education, agency, and the arts. This is just one of our campaigns, just trying to help educate and really pull stats that impact students so that educators, parents, and students are more aware. Next slide, please. Great. So now we're at a little bit about my latest book, as we mentioned, Good Girl, Bad Period. It's an anthology of lived experiences with curricular commentary by me. We have 80 plus real stories, 6 interviews from 4 continents, 11 countries, 22 states, globally representing more than 200 million with endometriosis and billions more trying to access healthcare. I use this opportunity in this book to draw parallels to historic women writers and social justice movements so that we can really teach into endometriosis being that, a movement. So it's more than, like we said, just a bad period. It actually is a social justice movement. So drawing the bridge between those 2 points is really important. Next slide, please. So what is storytelling? What is the power of storytelling? What can it do for us? When we just heard, when we've heard everyone's stories, that's how storytellers have the power to persuade, whether you're watching a movie or a show or listening to your grandmother tell a story. Every storyteller has the power to persuade. It also gives us an opportunity to raise awareness. It allows us to connect with emotions and allows others who are listening to the stories to connect with their emotions, as we just spoke about earlier. We have the ability to inspire people through our stories and to bring about change. Next slide, please. I want to pull some examples of campaigns that started with storytelling and people coming out of the silence, and where we are today with it. With, I don't know if you're familiar with the vagina monologues. That campaign is called V-Day. So every February 14th around the world, we are celebrating this awareness campaign to help raise awareness for domestic violence and other gender-based violence. Since V-Day has started, and just to back up a little bit, V-Day started with the beginning of Eve Onsler with her play, The Vagina Monologues, and it has expanded to so many things now. If you want to just Google V-Day, you can see all the wonderful things they're doing. But they've raised over $100 million now. They have events in more than 200 countries. And they've helped to fund grassroots anti-violence groups, rape crisis centers, domestic violence shelters, and safe houses in places like Kenya and Afghanistan. That started with women telling their stories. Then we can look at the Me Too movement. And I don't know how prevalent or that if that's just the United States focus, and if it is, I apologize.
No,
But
no,
that
we know it,
oh,
Sylvia. Yeah, I think
fantastic.
that took over the world.
Fantastic, fantastic. So that created laws, I mean, real laws, so that these situations don't happen in the future. States are banning non-disclosure agreements that cover sexual harassment. The Time's Up Legal Defense Fund has helped over 3,600 people seek justice. And Congress has reformed some of its process for staffers reporting sexual harassment. That is some social impact. So these are just great examples of what started out with a story and people coming out of the silence, you know, to real concrete social impact. Next slide, please. So getting back to the book, if you can just go a little, thank you. Getting back to the book, I wanted to let you know that it was very important to me to look at who came before me and whose shoulders we stand on. There are many, many women who have blazed trails that we may, you know, walk where we are today. Life would look a lot different for us if these women didn't exist before us. And it's very important that we, you know, give a tribute to everyone. I tried to include a lot of women in my research and in the book to keep drawing those parallels. And this is one that I was not aware of and was fascinated to know what she did, from being in Jamaica to then making such a huge impact in the UK. Una Marson is someone that I just think has done tremendous work as a feminist and a writer, and someone who shows us that storytelling, writing, and how she makes impact with it, and she certainly did. So that's just one of the writers and organizers I came across. I probably researched over 200, and just like we were you know, all getting a little emotional listening to our first story here, I felt the same way reading all of these women's stories, to think of the journeys they have all, you know, traveled on just to get where they wanted to get to, which was equity. So I encourage everyone to just not say your story, because your story is so important as well, but to listen to other stories, because we can always learn and always have more empathy and more perspective. Next slide, please. Aha, for the good girl, bad period, I was so fortunate that Julia agreed to an interview. If you don't, I'm sure you know Julia. And this is just an excerpt from her interview, which was really powerful. I asked the women that for interviews at the different regions, because I wanted to give the stories context. I wanted to understand first, what is it like to live in these regions? And based on the infrastructure, based on women's rights, based on politics and cultural norms and all kinds of things. And Julia did a fantastic job providing us the insight that laid the groundwork before we added the stories. Her quote, endometriosis was at the time considered a condition that mainly affects white women. Even the medical literature outlined it as such. Thus, as Black people comprise over 90% of the Barbadian population, the consensus was that this condition was not common amongst this demographic. And I believe it's boots on the ground insight like that that will really help the rest of the world understand, you know, where the women in the Caribbean are as far as healthcare, women's rights, and endometriosis care. Next slide, please. We were fortunate enough to have some of these stories. This is from Amalia. Endometriosis made me feel like I had a deep disability that the rest of the world did not understand. I was in constant incapacitating pain. But with each complaint, I was told that it was normal. It's a painful experience to constantly be in pain and know that none of these solutions is a fix, just patches. So that came to us from Jamaica. Next slide, please. Diane, she contributed her story from the Bahamas. It was really noticeable, and people began asking, are you pregnant? This made me feel very uneasy, and I became very concerned about this unexplainable stomach swelling. Where did this so-called demon endometriosis come from? It was taking over my life. What I find fascinating about even just that small snippet there is it's loaded with information that tells us that cultural norms of someone looking pregnant is going to be a lot of stigma and referring to endometriosis as a demon. So there's just so much insight into all of these stories. It's beautiful. Next slide, please. And from Katrina. I grew up with a taboo stigma attached to periods and experiencing excruciating pain. I could not go to school or participate in any activities and had to take the week off from work monthly. My world would change for the worse because I was diagnosed with endometriosis. I cried. I couldn't cope. It took me 20 years to find out what was causing so much havoc in this body of mine. I had adhesions fusing my organs. Now, each story on its own may seem like, oh, poor thing, she just has some bad periods, or she exaggerates, or any of the things we've heard about ourselves. But when we show up together with all of our stories, there is so much power in that. So I thank these three women and also Julia with her interview, and also everyone from around the world that contributed their stories, because with all the stories together, it really gives us a toolbox that we can take to make more change. Just like we saw with Vagina Monologues, that started out with a lot of women's stories, just like Me Too, also a lot of women's stories. Next slide, please. So we have the books, we have the play. Oh, sorry about that typo I see. How can you get involved? How can someone like you move it from, the theory of it to the action of it? So here are 3 examples. You can introduce us to professors and teachers, Good Girl Bad Period for inclusion in class curriculum and recommended reading lists. You can support and organize for policy change in your region. The Empower People's Women's Health Training proposed legislation is actually in the back of the book, verbatim. You can take it and run with it. Sorry, my dog's talking. And the last thing we have is partner with FemTruth Youth to show a screening or produce an original performance of Gaslit, a 3-act play. Now, these are all focused on what I do, but when you look at other advocates and what they do, think about how you can collaborate, amplify, and use tools that they're creating as well, so that we really are truly a community coming together. Next slide, please. So here's an example of how we are making this into real action. I pulled the pull quote, global reach, so we can help lend this movement forward. So this is one example of how Good Girl Bad Period is moving from storytelling to social impact. And I'll read this quote from Katrina. I'm honored to be one of the stories in this book representing Barbados. My foundation, Katrina Endometriosis and Women's Health Association, is a chosen organization to bring health education to our region's schools. We also have a proven record of menstrual equity policy. KIHA is committed to bringing Good Girl Bad Period to our classrooms and our legislation. This book is a huge resource benefiting our students here in Barbados, and I'm so thankful that Silvia has a global reach so we can help lead this movement forward. And I am so thankful that Katrina is able to use this book for her classrooms and for legislation. And this was exactly the goal of the book. So that's just one example how we are going to make social impact with the book in Barbados. Next slide, please. The pull quote is the Me Too of women's health. I just love that quote. And it's from Jerry. She says, from the ERA to endometriosis, human rights in our constitution and healthcare system are essential to women's autonomy. This book is the Me Too of women's health with an advocacy blueprint to stop the systemic gaslighting. These stories moved us to action. Bingo! We are committed to bringing Empower Pupils Women's Health Training legislative goals here to the state of Nevada. When I received that news, I couldn't have been happier. That actually showed me that this can happen. These stories moved them to action. And we did that with our endometriosis stories. So keep telling your stories, because there are people out there who can take it the next step and help us create social impact in all of our regions. Next slide, please. This is the last quote I'll be sharing today. Should be on every women's and gender studies class reading list. Oh, I'm sorry about the typos. Women's history is full of the denial of basic civil rights, not just property and contract rights, but fundamental human rights. Women deserve to be respected and to experience unbiased treatment in our schools, courts, and especially in the doctor's office. Millions of women experience the pain of endometriosis every year, yet they still suffer in silence as doctors routinely dismiss symptoms and pleas for help. Silvia's book brings silenced voices into the open where they can no longer be ignored. This book should be on every women's and gender studies class reading list. And this was from Sandra Cosgrove. She's a history professor at the, you can just scroll down a little bit. Oh, I didn't add it there. Southern Nevada College. It's the third largest junior college in the United States. It is a massive college. And I'm so happy to announce that Good Girl Bad Period is going to be on their reading lists from many different topics, from history to women and gender studies, because Sandra was an ally that helped make this happen. She is also committed to the policy and working with Jerry on the previous side to get the Empower People's Women's Health training adopted in Nevada. So with allies like this that I did not know before, but just happened to read the book and felt compelled, show us the extraordinary power of storytelling and the ways that we can create social impact. Next slide, please. And that's it for today. Thank you. But I would love to open the floor up for discussion. I would love this opportunity to hear about different storytelling and social impact projects and programs and campaigns that you are aware of. I only brought up a few. There are so many going on. And I feel like the more we talk about them, the more inspired we get with each other and the more ideas we create. I don't think it is, it's not a coincidence that I was very inspired by the vagina monologues when I was writing Gaslit and created a nonprofit that could follow in their footsteps. And it wasn't a new genre, it wasn't a new niche. There's lots of people doing documentaries and plays for social justice, as well as books. So learning from each other is fantastic. Having me here today, please also impart your wisdom on me, because I don't know it all and I am always willing to learn. So with that, Nikki, I'd love to hear from you too.
Thank you so much, Silvia. That was so, it's just so great knowing that there's so much activity happening around the world with endometriosis. I go back to a few years ago when I was in my young 20s, and that was a word even to many doctors that didn't really know what it was. And I was lucky that eventually I got the right treatment. One of the things that I like to talk about too is the cost of this whole disease. Is a very expensive disease, meaning you can't even just walk in a doctor's office and get find out what's going on. You have to go do a laparoscopy. You have to have the money to pay for this. And I think spreading the message, hopefully we will have a lot more advancement in how we can detect it in young girls without it being such a expensive venture.
Well, I think that's really, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I think that's really the point, to have so many stories, because some people touched on the economic, some people touched on the infertility, some people touched on losing relationships. If you only have one story, you're only going to get that one focus. Yes. And this really, it gives across so many intersections, someone's going to connect with someone's story.
Exactly, or some part of the story. Another thing that you spoke about, which is something I always had problems with, which is as women, we go to work. This disease could make you seem lazy as for an employer. It's like, women have periods. Why does Nikki need to take her 3 days every month for periods? And you come across as unmotivated. And plenty times with my male employers over the years, I basically had to sit down and have a conversation about my vagina with these men to kind of let them know what was going on and why I'm missing days. And it's such a personal disease. And many times you have to open up because of how it affects your life so badly in so many situations. As a
Absolutely.
performer, and any profession, women go through this, but as a performer, many times on stage, you have these horrible cramps and the theater is cold but somebody just paid their money to see you. So you can't really tell all your business out there, but it's something I've had to live with. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, that we can make younger girls really aware of what's happening with their bodies and stuff.
No, I love that. And that my policy focuses on students, and again, not being gaslit, but there are so many pieces of policy we need. For example, employment, protections, disability. We are in the poorhouse.
Yes.
We can't keep up, and it's
Yeah.
nonsensical. So
Yeah.
just like we said that we need many books touching on all the different things, we need many laws.
Yes.
Touching
We're
on
talking about laws. Amber needed to know what challenges did you face from legislators when starting this whole movement? I mean, because the start is usually the hardest part, right?
Well, I think that kind of went hand in hand with the storytelling, because even in my region, there are people that say, oh, that's the period girl. But when I come with so many stories, that's where you're making my Me Too case. Because otherwise people think it's only your problem, and we have bigger problems. Because how it is with policy is those that make policy are trying to do policy or laws that affect most of the people. And if they think it only affects one person, they're just not going to have time for it. So you really have to prove your case and show how many people. So it's on us to keep trying to get people to tell their stories. Because then if you're coming like the Me Too, and that's how I was trying to show, it has to be the enormity of the stories to where people feel comfortable, A, speaking up, and B, being an ally. And so that was my biggest obstacle in laws, is taking a taboo topic from even menstruation to and for everything around periods and women's health, and trying to create it so that everyone could talk about it in ways that was digestible. How do you make it, I'm not one of those to be, you see some campaigns and it'll be like, and people do it their own way, right? But it's more gory blood. I don't go about it that way, because I need to meet with legislators and they need to see statistics and, how many stories and where are your stories from? So if I'm hitting up a legislator, say in San Francisco, I better be ready to show that legislator a ton of San Francisco stories that are across different genres and different intersections. What do these stories look like? How do these people show up in their region? Because if I'm telling my story and I don't live there, or your story and it doesn't match. So getting the stories is why it's not just having the book, but you take this book and you take it to your legislator and you say, oh, what region? I have women from everywhere. You go look at that region, you pull those stories and you say, boom, right here. Florida, I've got Florida in there.
Yeah.
Barbados, I've got Barbados in there.
It's, I think we as women, when it's a woman disease, is not as important as, I always use this example. Look at Viagra. Oh my God, the couples didn't work too good. Bam, they found a solution. But something as endometriosis might not be as important because it's just women, and I think that's something we always have to keep fighting for. All right. So
well, to that point, let me add one more thing. Another thing I heard from a woman legislator is, I can't be seen taking too many women's issues. So I have to wait my turn.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been
So it's
waiting.
always a secondary issue, women issues. And that's, so we also have to fight that. Besides fighting
And
to
it's not
get
that
women.
everything else isn't valid, you know, especially in the last several years, there's been a lot of things coming to the forefront, but we should also be at the forefront.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But I love this approach though, which is stories. You know, I never thought about it like that, but the more stories we share, it kind of represents women and their stories. So I think it's awesome, because I'm a storyteller. I just love the idea of let's use stories to spread this message and try and get legislation done. And I think it's
document
awesome.
the stories.
Yes,
Document the stories so we have them.
When, you know, a small country like Trinidad and Tobago and we're trying to make, you know, try and do legislative stuff. And, you know, so we thank you for like leading the way and kind of showing us how it should be done. So we appreciate every one of you. Sasha Clark, she says, my daughter's 17 and suffers with endo. We went to the hospital and they gave her pethidine, a drug in the same category as morphine, gave her some relief. It only shifted the pain from level 10 to like a 7. You know, by the second day it stopped working, the pain remained. This is something that, you know, I could relate to. The pain level is awesome. And then sometimes the medication is so strong and it just has you really out of whack, you know. But something like this, you know, you just have to work with your doctors, you would suggest, the healthcare practitioners, for them to guide you in terms of pain relief, etc.
One thing I would want to say too is kudos to her, because her daughter already has someone on her side. And many of us didn't have that. Exactly. Many of us had mothers that didn't believe us. It can't be that bad. They were still the older generation. So that gives me so much hope to hear a mom advocate for her daughter. I have no doubt that daughter is in the best hands, and whatever decision they make is going to be the right decision for them, because she's not going through this in the dark. She has an adult with her.
Like many of us did.
Everything.
Yeah.
If she needs help further, again, I would lean on a patient advocate and keep building, so that you're building a team of people that can help direct you, because you may have a good doctor, but your doctor may not have all the information. So it really is information gathering at this point, and then full consent, so that she and her daughter are making the right choices for them.
And there's so much more information now, you know, in terms of social media, et cetera, anything you want, you can really sit down. I remember my gynecologist gave me a book about it. I still have this book up to this day. And she said, go home and read it. And I went home and read and trying to understand. And because it's such a kind of mysterious kind of disease. And I think it's awesome now that this next generation, as you said, have the support, a lot more information, and the information is out there. You can sit down, take your time. You as a parent and child could sit down and really go through it together. And I think that is, as you said, so great when you have that kind of support. She also
probably doesn't even realize what a huge thing that is, but it is huge, because many of us didn't have that.
Yeah, we fish strong in the dark. As I said, when I first got diagnosed, they insisted it was kidney. It had to be kidney because there was blood in the urine. And then it was maybe, well, let's check the liver. And then it went on until I think the last point was the gynecological aspect. And there was a lot of money spent in trying, as you say, trying to find out what this disease, what was causing this pain. And I think hopefully through this too, we can save a lot of money. They know what endometriosis is. And the minute Sasha spoke to me and I heard these symptoms, I said, but that's sounding like endometriosis, you know? So information is out there, and hopefully we can try and get as much information. She also says, that I cried seeing my daughter in pain and I couldn't help her. She's writing exams now and she has to take birth control for 3 months, so she won't endure any pain during exam. That I remember being on birth control to kind of help with the period pains. They didn't know it was endometriosis yet, but it was one of the kind of solutions at the time, birth control. How does that really affect endometriosis? Do you suggest it or?
Oh, well, I'm not medical at all. I write more about the social aspect of it.
All right.
And I'm very political. as far as trying to get policy passed. I come from that kind of world. There are a lot of really good references and people to go to, as you said, on social media. I would start with the guest you had last time, Heather from the CEC. I think honestly that should be everyone's first stop, because not only are they, such reputable excision surgeons, but they also do so much advocacy that you're able to learn a lot and read their site, and it is their social media. And it is the latest information. That's where I get a lot of my information from, and you're able to see what's reputable within that. But I also think there's a lot of I could have done this, I should have done that, I didn't know. We have to also give ourselves a break. I went on the pill to get myself through college. Did it cause problems later on? Probably. Would I do it again? Yes, because I wanted that college degree more than anything. And so I think it really is having the full consent of knowing all the options and then making the decisions that are for you, very personal. We can't judge what someone else does. We don't know what their financial situation is. We're not living in their shoes, but we can make sure that we're trying again to raise awareness on all the options and give them the best resources. If you hear someone is repeatedly getting, ablation surgery every 9 months, you can gently say, have you heard of excision?
Yeah.
But that's a very hard conversation because not everyone can afford excision. You hear people say, oh, I don't want to do the endo diet. For some it works, for some it doesn't. So I think presenting all this information is crucial, but then not judging.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
like,
everyone is different. Every case is different.
We don't know. We don't know what's going to work for her.
Yeah.
And if the pill gets someone through college, who am I to judge? If someone chooses a hysterectomy, knowing it's not a cure for endo, but they don't want any more periods, that's their choice.
Yeah.
If you go in knowing it's not a cure for endo, if you go in knowing the birth control isn't going to cure it, it's still
basically there's no cure for endometriosis.
But if you know it's a mask, right? And that when you stop taking the pill, you better be ready, because it's going to come back with a vengeance, or whatever you're doing to mask the symptoms. But like I said, with such caring mothers,
it helps. I mean,
they don't even know. A mom
kind of support
them with a heat pad, to help them with medication, soup, a smoothie, to go shopping for them, to do their laundry, for them to cry to. That's huge.
Yeah, I didn't have that. Because you didn't even know what you was crying for. You just had pain and nobody understood, and that was it. I'm so happy to have Dr. Jackman with us. Hi, Doc. Hope all is well. She says, we need to advocate for yourself as a patient or parent as a patient. Get a second opinion and find someone who's an expert on endometriosis and who will listen to you. I think that's important because many doctors at the time didn't really, as I said in my earlies, didn't even know what endometriosis was. It really had to be gynecological. So when I was going to my regular health provider, it was, I didn't know what it was. So they kept, as you say, gaslighting. Let's see if it's this. Let's see if it's that. Let's see if it's this. So it is great when we can find doctors that know what they're talking about, or at least could recommend someone who does know.
And do you have that where you are? Because I don't know how many endometriosis surgeons are in your side of the world, but is that something that is a resource to you, or do you have to travel to the States or to the UK?
I think in Trinidad, we have a better, the gynecological doctors, they have a better understanding of it. And I know maybe Abisha or someone would be able to let us know if we really have the doctors in Trinidad that specifically deal with endometriosis.
Yeah.
Abisha says, selecting a doctor with the right skills, example, specialized in endo, etc., MIGS, will make a big difference. This can make a big difference between the 1 effective surgery and 10 ineffective surgeries. You have to go Sangre Grande. All right. Janelle says we have 3 endometriosis surgeons, including Dr. Brady in Trinidad. So that's good to know that, as I said, in my time, there was no endometriosis doctors. So to hear that there's 3 now, I think is just awesome, right?
That's
so
amazing.
Sasha,
That's amazing.
yeah, Sasha, we know we have to get on to Dr. Brady. And hopefully, as I said, this is great news for endometriosis patients in Trinidad and Tobago, and that there's someone that understands what I'm going through, what my daughter is going through, someone I don't have to, because when I was explaining my symptoms as a young person, you know, it was crazy. It was, you know, pain during sex, those kind of symptoms, and just confused. And just knowing now that we have symptoms, we can like click and say, you know, that's sounding like endometriosis. Because many young girls approach me and say, Auntie Nikki, you think this could be endo? And, you know, you could get a feel of it. So I am just so elated that we have at least 3 doctors in Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, I'm glad you said that with the symptoms, because my book, Flo's Friends, The Wellness Guide Beyond Menstruation, that's how I approach that, is each disease, endo, has a little character, and that character shares its symptoms. Because that's all a young person can understand. You know, are you heavy bleeding? Are you in pain? Are you bloating? Because then we can kind of at least help guide you to what it could be.
What it could be. Yeah,
and then there's a resource for each disease so that they can do their own research. And that is really important. And I think it's really important too for books, all of our books, to be in all of these doctors' offices, or at least sent to these doctors, because so many of these stories said, my doctor said it was the worst ever. That needs to stop. It's not the worst ever. It's that your doctor is not seeing endometriosis. So maybe it's not the best doctor, because someone who sees it all the time and is a specialist in endometriosis wouldn't be saying that kind of information. And to have us, it's just as a disservice, because then we do like, oh, I'm the worst ever. It's not that. Yes, everyone's story is horrible, but we are all equally oppressed in this. We're not equally, actually, that's totally wrong. We're not equally oppressed on this, because there's different variations of intersection, of course. But as far as the misinformation, that's happening for all of us.
Yeah, misinformation. And this is why, you know, it's so important that the TTEA really highlight just conversation like this, so that we can all be a little more educated. All right, so does anybody have a contact for Dr. Brady? Because Sasha's trying to get some information. All right, let me see how we're doing with time. Okay, I think it's almost time for us to wrap up, because I think we have almost been an hour. If anyone want to ask any more questions, Silvia, we can't thank you enough, because this has been awesome that you can share, and you've really opened up my mind. Earlier you talked about Gaslit, the play, and you know, as a theater person, I know Sasha is a theater person too. This is something, is it possible that we could contact you if we needed the script, etc., if we wanted to perform it in Trinidad?
Absolutely. We have the whole package set up so that you can perform it. It becomes a fundraiser for both of our organizations.
Awesome.
I help promote it, you promote it, and you take the script and you make it your own. You regionalize it.
Right. That would be awesome.
With Gaslit, that was 100 different comments on things you've heard at the doctor's office.
Oh, yes.
That is a conversation starter. Every time the play starts, when we performed it, it starts in silence, the stigma. And then once everyone's little like, you know, have you heard this? Have you heard that? The doctor said, all of a sudden the giggles, the conversations, me too, wow. And all of a sudden we're all talking.
Yes.
It needs that kind of like the catalyst to break that barrier, right?
Right.
To normalize it. So I would love to do the play with you, and I would love to see your version of it.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So many different versions. That's fascinating. One of the ones we had was a South Asian version. And I had just never seen it through those eyes. And it was fascinating, because taboo and stigma in all of our cultures, there are lots of similarities, but there's lots of differences.
Yes,
and I think conversation is the only way I can understand your experience, you can understand my experience, and so forth.
All right, awesome. Thanks for sharing, Ms. Ramdeen. All right, guys, any more questions before we let Sylvie go? I'm just making sure I got everybody's messages out. Thanks for sharing. Okay.
Well, if you have anyone that's interested in policy, it's in the back of the book.
Okay. How can we get the book? Everything's on Amazon?
Yep. It'll be on Amazon May 16th.
That's the last one, right? Okay, awesome. All right, guys, any more questions? This was so enlightening. Everyone is thanking you so much, Sylvia. That's my grandmother's name, and I just fell in love with you with that name. It was so nice to meet a younger person with that name. So, Sylvia, thank you. Hopefully, we could do some work together and make sure that we exchange our numbers and emails while I'm out here. And,
I would love that, Nikki. Thank you so much for inviting me today. I've enjoyed meeting you all. And like I said, when I was working on the Caribbean region, I enjoyed just learning about the women that have come out of your region and done such amazing things.
So I need next book, okay? Just call me for the next book, okay?
For sure. For sure.
All right, everyone. Everyone is thanking you. We don't take time for granted. So I appreciate every minute you've spent with us. I appreciate all the participants. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get the messages out there. Let's do what we have to do to protect our young girls, and hopefully they could be a little more comforted knowing that there are women out there fighting for their rights and fighting for everything that they need to fight for. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sylvia, amazing. Thank you. I can't wait to read the play. I'll contact you because I think it's something that we could really target our young girls through the TTEA. Many times we would organize visits to schools to talk to the young girls. And I think this would be so interesting because for me, theater is, we can get so much information out. All right. V has just joined us. She's a little late, but for those that have missed it, we will make sure and get it on where we could keep spreading the information. So have a great evening, Sylvia. Have a great evening to all our participants. On behalf of the board of TTEA, we want to thank you so much for joining, and a lot more stuff is going to be happening. So keep your ears and eyes open. Sylvia, hold it down, girl. That's how we say it in Trinidad. Hold it down, okay?
Okay, and keep telling your stories.
Yes, we will. We will. Thank you. Thanks for sharing the information with us. Okay, everybody, have a good evening. Be safe. It's a holiday in Trinidad right now, so eat your curry and have a little taste for me. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Hi, Janelle.